A different choice. I woke up back in time on the day Matthew Peterson confessed his love to me, the day he promised he'd never let me down. This time, I didn't even hesitate. I turned him down flat. In my last life, I believed him. And that one promise kept me trapped for 12 long years. I devoted myself to his family, taking care of his parents, looking after his sister, and managing everything like it was my job. And for what? Because I thought we were in love. Everyone around us said we were the perfect couple, that we'd been meant for each other since childhood. It was only a matter of time before we'd get married, they said. And I believed them too. Then, on my 35th birthday, he handed me an envelope. Inside was an invitation to his wedding. "I'm getting married next month," he said. "And since you're like a sister to me, I'd love your help with the preparations." That was the day I became the town's biggest joke, the woman who wasted her best years on a man who never saw her as anything more than a convenient sidekick. But now I get to live again, and I'm done playing the fool. Let someone else be the unpaid nanny, the loyal sidekick who gives up everything for nothing. Not me. Not this time. This time, I'm choosing myself. Chapter 1. The car hit me hard, and in an instant, my legs were shattered beneath the wreckage. I lay there, blood filling my mouth, pain so blinding I couldn't even scream. As I drifted in and out of consciousness, my life, 35 years of it, flashed before me like a film reel on fast forward. In the end, it all boiled down to one thing: regret. I wanted to ask Matthew Peterson just once, before the end, why? Why did you lie? Why did you make me wait, year after year, like a fool? I remembered the day it all started. Graduation night. He was drunk, spilling out promises of forever, swearing he'd never let me down. I believed him. Later, he told me his career wasn't stable and that he didn't want to ruin my life by rushing into marriage. "Once I'm successful," he said, "I'll give you the life you deserve." And I believed him. Again. For those two promises, I gave up 12 years of my life. I took care of his parents, watched over his sister, and ran his household like a devoted wife without ever getting to be one. Day after day, year after year, I did it all. Everyone around us said we were perfect for each other, fated since childhood. They all thought it was just a matter of time before we got married. I watched as Matthew's career soared. He became someone in the world of the rich and powerful while I disappeared into the shadows. I went from a young, hopeful woman to someone with lines around her eyes, still waiting, always waiting. And then, on my 35th birthday, he handed me his wedding invitation. But the bride wasn't me, and the woman in his arms wasn't me either. As my vision faded, I could hear voices, faint but distinct. "Olivia's been with you forever, Matthew. She's like a sister to you. Emma, you're too soft-hearted. She chose to have an accident on our wedding day just to spite us." A sigh. Well, she got what was coming to her. I floated above them, staring down at their blurry figures. The rage inside me swelled, thick and oppressive, almost suffocating. I lunged at them with everything I had left. And then, I disappeared into the void. Chapter 2. I blinked awake, and there it was, Matthew's name flashing repeatedly on my phone screen. I almost tossed it across the room. It's only been 3 days since I came back to this life, but even now, I can't keep my composure when it comes to him. Just seeing his name fills me with disgust. When I didn't pick up, he started spamming me with texts. "What's going on, Olivia? Seriously? You're upset because you stole Emma's design? Even Emma didn't make a big deal out of it, and now you're acting like a child. Stop it and come back to work. Or I'll have to mark you down for skipping." Right. The internship. In my last life, Matthew had caught me off guard, confessing to me out of the blue after a night of drinking. He promised me everything: a future together, a career. "The company's just getting started," he said. "Why don't you come to help me out? When the time comes, I'll personally write you a glowing recommendation." And then, with a smile, he added, "It's a tough world out there, especially for someone as pretty as you." I was flattered. Blushing like a fool. And with a few sweet words, I let him pull me into his company as an underpaid assistant. My salary was a joke, and the work? It was like I was doing 5 jobs at once. But at the time, I didn't care. I was too wrapped up in him, too blinded by the idea that we were building something together. I thought I was helping him grow. I even taught myself how to design original artwork, staying up for weeks to create a character concept for the company's new game. I poured my heart into it. And when I finally turned it in, they told me it was too similar to Emma's design. It was my own idea, my own work, and yet I was the one being accused of copying. I'll never forget the stares in that conference room, the mocking glances from people who didn't think I belonged there. And Matthew? He stood by Emma's side, looking at me like I was the one in the wrong. "Olivia, it's not that we don't trust you," he said. "But we have no reason to doubt a professional artist like Emma. You're just an assistant." Every word from his mouth felt like a slap in the face. But not this time. This time, I'm done being the fool. I shot back a message. "I've wrapped up my tasks. My resignation is in your inbox." 5 years. I spent 5 years by Matthew's side, working as his assistant for a measly $1,500 a month. How could I have been so naive? Then a thought hit me. My parents were close friends with the Peterson family. After they passed away in a car accident, the driver paid $500,000 in settlement. Since my parents had no other relatives, the money was entrusted to the Peterson family, and they took me in when I was just 16. But somehow in all those years, I never saw a dime of that money. And now I realize Matthew's startup capital came from the Peterson family. Could it be that the money was actually my parents' settlement? It was all starting to make sense. His affection, his promises, it wasn't love. He was just keeping me around to secure the money. I glanced around at my tiny apartment, dark and cramped, a place I rented just to be closer to work. Meanwhile, the house my parents left behind, the Peterson family was living in it. In my last life, I was too blinded by Matthew's sweet talk, too distracted to even think about any of this. How stupid I was. That night, Matthew showed up at my apartment. He tossed a bag of cheap, thumb-sized buns onto the table and sat down like he owned the place. "Eat," he said. "I bet you haven't eaten all day, right? Look, creative overlap happens all the time. Don't make this a big deal, Olivia. Emma actually wanted to come with me to talk to you, but I told her not to." I stared at the bag of buns and suddenly, a memory flashed in my mind. A company dinner from years ago. Emma didn't like barbecue, so Matthew drove all the way down the mountain to buy her $300 worth of gourmet bread. It was about the difference in treatment. I get the $2 buns, while Emma gets the royal treatment. That's how it always was. In Matthew's eyes, I was just a stepping stone, while Emma was the one he put on a pedestal. The truth had been staring me in the face all along, and I had been too blind to see it. I looked at Matthew coldly. "Emma stole my design," I said. "I found out someone accessed my computer, and the company's security cameras could prove it. But of course, the footage from that day is conveniently missing. Too many coincidences, Matthew. Don't tell me you didn't notice. You didn't believe me, but you were quick to defend Emma. Matthew, your intentions have been obvious from the start." Matthew shot up from his seat, his calm demeanor vanishing in an instant. "Olivia, what are you trying to say?" I looked up at him, and for some reason, I started to laugh. "Let's make it simple. Why don't you post on social media right now and tell everyone we're together? Can you do that?" He stood there frozen, not moving an inch. I stared at him for a moment longer, then pointed to the door. "Get out." Chapter 3. Matthew called a few more times after that. I didn't bother answering. I just blocked him. I'd already packed up everything in my apartment. Then, just as I was about to check out, I got an email from one of the companies I'd applied to for a job interview. I replied with a time to meet. As I hit send, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was his mother calling. I picked up, more out of habit than anything else. Olivia. Patricia barked. We've got guests over. Come back and cook something. I calmly closed my laptop, keeping my voice steady. Sure. I'll be right there. In my last life, I treated Patricia like she was my second mother. I bent over backward to please her, running errands, cooking, looking after her like a personal servant. I did this 7 or 8 times a month, barely allowing myself a moment to breathe. Sometimes I'd even work myself sick. I thought my efforts would be appreciated. I thought it meant something. But while I was busy playing the perfect daughter-in-law, Matthew was already planning a future with Emma behind my back. Patricia knew all along, but she just kept using me, milking my kindness for all it was worth. Why? What did I owe any of them? Enough was enough. Since they'd all be home today, it was time I got what was mine. I booked a moving truck and loaded up all my things. When I pulled up to the house, Sophia, Matthew's sister, rushed out to greet me. Olivia, what's going on? Why do you have a moving truck? I shrugged. I'm moving back in. What else? She trailed behind me, clearly wanting to say more but staying quiet. It wasn't until I walked inside that I understood why she looked so uneasy. Emma was already there. Patricia noticed me right away and, not missing a beat, started complaining. Why are you so late? Where's the food? Are you planning on cooking or not? I ignored her and glanced toward the living room. Matthew and Emma were sitting side by side on the couch, still laughing at some private joke. A tray of freshly washed fruit sat neatly in front of them, toothpicks stuck into each piece. I'd never received that kind of treatment. Every time I came over to visit, Patricia handed me a long list of chores, none of which involved sitting down and eating fruit. Ever since I was 16 and the Peterson family took me in, Patricia had this habit of dragging me along to the town square, where she'd tell anyone who would listen how much I ate, how expensive it was to feed me, and how they spoiled me rotten. In reality, I could count on one hand the number of times I saw meat on the table, and fresh fruit was practically a luxury. But I was too timid to ever correct her. Matthew stood up and waved me over, his voice sharp and impatient. Olivia, come here. Emma's here to make peace with you, so stop being difficult. This whole thing is your fault anyway. You're just an assistant. Why are you even bothering with original artwork? Do you even know what you're doing? Now stop standing there like an idiot and come over. Ever since Matthew's career started taking off, he'd developed this annoying habit of talking like he was some kind of big-shot CEO, as if the world was his to command. Before I could respond, Emma chimed in, her voice soft and soothing, like she was doing me a favor. Olivia, I came here to see you today. Let's just put the past behind us, okay? I'm not going to hold a grudge. Chapter 4. I glanced over at Emma. She had that polished, graceful look, beautiful, poised. When she first walked into the office, she was all anyone could talk about. The guys practically tripped over themselves around her, like wolves catching the scent of fresh prey. But Matthew? He played it cool, completely unfazed. Funny how the ones who seem least interested always turn out to be the most dangerous. I let out a small laugh. Without hesitation, I walked over, picked up the cup of coffee from the table, and threw it straight at Matthew. Matthew, is this what your family's about? Leeching off others, pretending it's your right? I sneered. Your mouth reeks of entitlement. How about a little coffee to wash that out? You come into my house, talking down to me like you own the place? Who do you think you are? Matthew blinked, completely caught off guard. Emma? She just sat there frozen. And Patricia, well, she lost it. She stormed toward me, ready to slap me across the face, but I sidestepped her at the last second. She tripped over her own feet and crashed to the floor. Ow, my back! My back! She shrieked, clutching her lower spine dramatically. Matthew, still in shock, snapped back to reality and rushed to her side, roughly pushing me out of the way. Olivia, how dare you? If something happens to my mother, I'll make sure you regret it. I stumbled a bit from the force of his push but quickly steadied myself. Meeting his furious gaze, I couldn't help but chuckle. Then, without a word, I grabbed the nearest ceramic cup and hurled it at the wall beside him. It shattered on impact, sending shards flying everywhere. "Oh, are you blind now? Didn't see who threw the first punch," I said, my voice cold. She came at me. What was I supposed to do? Just stand there and take it? Matthew and his mother both flinched, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief. "Olivia, what the hell is wrong with you? Are you crazy?" I smiled, a calmness settling over me that I hadn't felt in years. "No, Matthew, I'm not crazy. I'm finally thinking clearly. I've woken up to what your family really is, a bunch of parasites. For 10 years you've bled me dry. You've taken my money, my time, my energy and treated me like a servant in return." I turned to Patricia, who had gone extremely pale, her usual smug expression replaced with fear. "And you," I said, my voice sharp and cold. "You've played the helpless old woman for years. Every time something hurts, you call me not your son, not your daughter. Me, what am I, your personal nurse?" Matthew's face twisted with anger, but he stayed quiet. Patricia looked like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Even Sophia, who was usually so outspoken, was huddled in the corner, too scared to move. I waved to the movers by the door, signaling them to start bringing in my things. But Emma stepped forward, blocking their way, her voice full of false righteousness. "Olivia, I get that you're upset. I really do. But let's not forget that the Peterson family raised you. Mrs. Peterson's treated you like their own daughter. You can't just turn your back on them like this. You owe them something. Apologize. Whatever's happened, you're still family." I glanced at Matthew, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked away, avoiding the confrontation as if he wasn't part of the problem. I almost laughed at how ridiculous this all was. So this was the story Matthew had spun for her? I turned to Emma, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what they told you? That they raised me? Did they also mention the $500,000 my parents left behind? The money that was supposed to be mine? They took that money, lived in my house, threw me scraps of food for 2 years, and you call that family?" I took a step closer, my voice cold and unyielding. "If you're so generous, Emma, why don't you give them $500,000? Why don't you hand over a house for them to live in?" Her face turned bright red, her self-righteousness crumbling. I turned back to Matthew and his mother, delivering the final blow. "Matthew, don't pretend you don't know the truth. My parents' settlement money was what started your business. It's been 10 years since I turned 18. Don't you think it's time to pay me back? What's your plan? Keep pretending it never happened? Use my parents' money and sleep easy at night? Aren't you afraid they'll come back to haunt you? And this house? You've been living here rent-free for 12 years. That ends today." I crossed my arms, my voice steady, leaving no room for argument. "As for that money, if it's not in my account in 3 days, we'll settle this in court." Chapter 5. Patricia, who had been dramatically sprawled on the floor, suddenly jumped up like nothing had happened. "You think raising you didn't cost us money?" I didn't flinch. I raised my voice even louder, cutting her off. "Sure, raising a kid costs money. But it sure as hell doesn't cost $500,000. If you're so confident in what you're saying, you wouldn't mind if we looked into it, right? Let's investigate then. Let's see where that money went." I folded my arms and watched the entire Peterson family deflate like someone had pulled the air out of them. They were all quiet now, looking like they had no idea what to say. Matthew shot up from his seat, his face tight with frustration. "Olivia, enough already. Do you think this looks good for you? Making a scene like this?" Before he could say anything else, I slapped him across the face. Hard. "Who do you think you are to lecture me, Matthew? You're the biggest hypocrite of all. You've been after my parents' compensation money from the start. You couldn't wait to get your hands on it. You started messing with me when I turned 18, then played the good guy, confessing your love after I graduated. But you never wanted anyone to know, did you? You were just trying to keep me around until you could drain me dry. Stop pretending you're some kind of saint. Matthew's face twisted with rage, and he raised his hand as if to hit me. But before he could make a move, the movers I hired stepped in, blocking him. I wasn't dumb enough to come here alone without backup. I'd made sure to bring a couple of guys with me, just in case things got physical. Matthew stumbled back, clearly out of his depth. He wasn't the tough type, and ever since he started his business, he'd only gotten softer. All it took was a little shove for him to lose his balance and fall back into his chair. Emma rushed over to him, helping him back up. She turned to me with a look of disapproval, like I was the one in the wrong here. I met her gaze and smiled coldly. Don't worry, Emma. We'll deal with your part in all of this later. Stealing my designs, tampering with the security footage, you really thought no one would find out? For the first time, the confidence drained from her face. Her usual perfect expression wavered, revealing something uglier beneath. I had proof now. In my last life, Matthew had convinced me to let it go, saying that defending myself would hurt the company's reputation. And like a fool, I'd listened to him. I let them pin the blame on me and stayed quiet. But not this time. This time, I wasn't backing down. I waved toward the movers. Start bringing my stuff in. And while you're at it, throw out anything that belongs to them. When Patricia saw the movers packing up her things, she started screaming, stomping her feet like a child throwing a tantrum. I just stood there, watching her with a calm, detached look. Do you want a microphone? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Maybe you can shout to the whole neighborhood about how the Peterson family has been bleeding me dry for years. You could tell them all how you've been living off the inheritance meant for a dead man's daughter. I glanced at Matthew. I'm sure your golden boy would love the extra attention. Patricia's face went pale, the fight draining out of her. She looked completely defeated. A moment later, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed, fainting right there on the floor. Mom! Matthew's face twisted in fury, his voice shaking with rage. Olivia, if anything happens to her, I swear, I'll make sure you pay. I'll destroy you. I shrugged, completely unfazed. Go ahead. I'll be waiting. I turned back to the movers, raising my voice. Anything that isn't claimed, throw it out. Suddenly, Patricia's eyes snapped open. She jumped up and rushed to stop the movers from touching her precious sofa and table as if waking from a bad dream. I let out a small, mocking laugh, turning to Matthew with a raised eyebrow. His face flushed with embarrassment, caught between anger and shame, and for once, he had nothing to say. Chapter 6. 3 days later. The house was cleared out. But the money didn't arrive. I sued them. I also tipped off local influencers, making the story go viral. In this fast-paced world, stories of exploiting orphans grab attention online. Shen Xing had a decent mind. His 2 recent small games were hits, making him a top young entrepreneur locally, receiving much support. But who would have thought such a promising youth built his success on exploiting an orphan? Though the buzz wasn't as high as I hoped. Shen Xing was genuinely worried. Receiving the lawsuit notice, Mrs. Shen fainted for real. Late at night, I got a call from an unknown number. Groggy, I answered. Shen Xing's cold, hoarse voice came through. Sheng Qi Yi, I accept your terms. You just want to go public, right? Fine, let's go public. My only condition is to let my parents and sister return. They're old and can't handle this. And the money, the company's funds are tied up in a new project. I can offer shares instead. Listening to his shameless words, my mind cleared, sleep gone. Listen to him act all noble. I rolled my eyes, burying my head in the pillow. Shen Xing, are you trying to avoid paying? You're just a freeloader, average looking, not even well built. I'm young and pretty. Do you think you're irreplaceable? Use your time to find the money. Shen Xing's breathing grew rapid, clearly enraged. Sheng Qi Yi, who do you think you are? You're 28, almost 30. Do you still think you're a goddess? Working for $3,500 a month and you feel superior? I coldly replied. Remember to pay up. After hanging up, I couldn't sleep. Shen Xing's words replayed in my mind. I'm 28 and age disadvantageous in the job market. But who caused this? Who lied to me for 12 years? How could he be so self-righteous? This time, I saw him for what he was. So what if I'm 28? In my past life, I was dragged to 35. This time, I'm 7 years younger with endless possibilities. A few days later, the money arrived, 2.7 million. I had it calculated, down to the water and electricity bills during my stay. If I counted all the caregiving, hospital trips, and expenses, it would be a significant sum. I didn't dig deeper, considering it a lesson learned. Blocking Shen Xing's number again. I sent him a final message. If you touch Lin Xiyan's design, I'll raise hell. I didn't care if Shen Xing jumped in rage. I had a new life to embrace. Chapter 7. I sent out over 10 resumes. The responses were few. Most were exploitative, looking for cheap labor. Or roles with unclear responsibilities, expecting one person to do several jobs for one salary. I refused them all. In the end, only 3 were suitable. After interviews, I chose a rising studio. The owner had won first place in a jewelry design competition, gaining instant fame. The candidates were top graduates or seasoned professionals. Yet the owner chose me, an ordinary applicant. Later, I found out he liked my design. He considered making it a flagship series. I was stunned. Leaving behind the toxic family, my career was taking off. A senior colleague winked at me. Our boss is not only handsome but also generous. If your design is chosen, you'll get a payout and royalties. I was nervous but calmed down. Regardless, getting into this studio validated my skills. I needed to work harder. Those years weren't wasted. I could start over. As I prepared to leave, a colleague asked me to stay for a talk with the boss. My nerves flared up again. Sheng Qi Yi, long time no see. I looked up to see a model-like man approaching, his delicate face contrasting with his build under the lights. I stood up, slightly stunned. Qia He, what are you doing here? A possibility crossed my mind, and my eyes widened. You're the boss? Qia He raised an eyebrow. Surprised? I hesitated, processing the information. Who would have thought the junior who used to chase after me in school would become my boss? The one who treated our major as a hobby had won first place in a jewelry design competition. While I, genuinely passionate about jewelry design, had lost my way. I exhaled and smiled. Qia He, good to see you. Qia He shook my hand briefly before getting to the point. Let's get straight to it. I like your design. It's not part of your work post-joining, so I'll sign it separately. You'll get an upfront payment and royalties after it's launched. I'll send you an electronic contract. Take a look. I reviewed the contract. Everything seemed in order. After signing, I couldn't help but notice Qia He's cool demeanor. I suddenly asked, are you going for a cool guy image now? Qia He frowned. What do you mean? Nothing. It's just that you seem different from before. Anyway, see you later. Grabbing my bag, I waved and left. As I walked out, it started to rain heavily. I rummaged through my bag, realizing I had forgotten my umbrella. Watching the downpour, I sighed and opened a ride-hailing app. It was rush hour, and the rain made it difficult to get a ride. After waiting for half an hour, I considered braving the rain. A car pulled up in front of me. Lin Xiyan smiled from the passenger seat. Shen Xing glanced at me from the driver's seat, sneering. Qi Yi, it really is you. I thought I saw wrong. If Shen Xing hadn't insisted on coming to Blue Ocean for dinner, we wouldn't have run into you. Are you working nearby? If you haven't found a ride, come with us. Shen Xing isn't petty, and you two were childhood friends. Whatever happened, it's in the past. I kept my eyes forward, internally amused. Blue Ocean Restaurant was somewhere I had once brought Shen Xing. I spent my entire first paycheck to treat him to a meal. Shen Xing was useless in every way except one. Si Yan is talking to you. Are you ignoring her? When did you become so rude, Sheng Qiyi? Shen Xing's disdainful voice cut through the rain. Shen Xing! Lin Si Yan grabbed his hand on the wheel. Si Yan, if she doesn't care, forget it. No need to force it. They argued briefly before driving off. I looked down at my phone, then saw a shadow fall over me. Looking up, I saw He holding an umbrella. His tone was flat. I was passing by and saw you. As fellow alumni, let me give you a ride. I hesitated but nodded. Curious thoughts swirled in my mind. Wasn't his home in the opposite direction? Arriving at my place, I thanked He and got out. He suddenly spoke. Did you break up? I replied vaguely. Sort of. In reality, I had never truly been in a relationship in either life. Shen Xing's confession was a ploy. He never gave me a proper title, and even the so-called secret relationship was a lie. It was all my own misunderstanding. I raised an eyebrow and countered. Since when are you so interested in others' private matters? Sorry. He's lips moved, his apology sincere. Chapter 8. I saw on a former colleague's social media that Shen Xing's game had launched. He had indeed used Lin Si Yan's stolen design. The game's stunning visuals and attractive characters created quite a stir. Some even praised the artist, despite criticizing the plot and gameplay. The artist deserved a reward. Lin Si Yan claimed credit online, gaining 1 million followers and the title of a goddess. Even Shen Xing announced the game's success. Just like in my past life, this game was Shen Xing's stepping stone to higher status. It was my blood and sweat, trampled and stolen, that bore fruit. I learned about Shen Xing's celebration party and decided to give them a surprise. The celebration went as planned. Shen Xing had invited the media, making a big deal out of it. At the entrance I signaled, and the folk band behind me started playing loudly. 2 lion dancers jumped up, unfurling red banners from their mouths. Congratulations to Lin Si Yan for stealing my work and becoming famous. Shen Xing rushed out, seeing the scene, his face twisted in anger. He didn't notice Lin Si Yan's pale face as she stepped back. The media and onlookers were thrilled, capturing the drama. Shen Xing stormed over, his deep eyes pleading. Sheng Qiyi, must you ruin me? I smiled sweetly. Didn't I warn you? I said if you dared to use it, I'd cause trouble. This is my friendly warning. I knew Shen Xing wouldn't pass up this chance. He had bet everything on this project. The more I opposed, the more he insisted. I cast a wide net, waiting for him and Lin Si Yan to fall in. Is the plagiarism claim true? Miss Lin, please respond. Mr. Shen, how did you handle this internally? Miss Lin. Lin Si Yan was cornered by the press, calling out for Shen Xing. Shen Xing shielded her, facing relentless questions. A colleague shouted urgently. Boss, we're trending on Weibo. The top trend on Weibo was my post from a secondary account. It detailed my creative process, showing I didn't create the designs in half a month, but had been working on them for over 6 months, pouring my heart into every character. I had written their backstories, sketched, finalized, revised, and finalized again. Anyone could see my deep love for them. Sheng Qiyi. I have a background in art. I'm not clueless. I started from scratch, not because I was seen as inferior. Learning that my work was stolen and I was kicked out of the company, enraged netizens bombarded the company's official site and the game's announcement with criticism. Lin Si Yan's title of goddess was replaced with thief. Despite the evidence, Shen Xing remained silent. Later, someone contacted me to buy the character rights. I found out Shen Xing had sold the game. Chapter 9. Lin Si Yan, can't you be rational? I paid you back the money. Now you want more? I don't have it. I sold the company. If you hadn't stolen the designs, I wouldn't be here. Shen Xing grabbed his hair, on the verge of a breakdown. Lin Si Yan glared. What do you mean? Blaming me? You exploited Shang Qiyi, and now you're blaming me? I'm not a fool you can manipulate. If I hadn't seen potential in you, would I have invested? You're nothing. Shen Xing snapped. You think you're still a princess? You're a nobody. You're not worth a fraction of Shang Qiyi. I stood under a tree, watching them argue on the street. A car suddenly sped by, hitting them both. The noise stopped. I was stunned. Was this karma? A hand covered my eyes, a man's voice cold. Don't look. It's gory. I was busy with a new product launch when I got a call from Shen Yin. She was the only one in the Shen family I hadn't blocked. She urgently said Shen Xing had injured his brain and leg, insisting on finding me. I didn't pay much attention. After work, I was startled by a figure crouching in the corner. Shen Xing, in a hospital gown, with bandages on his head and leg, looked severely injured. Seeing me, he showed a mix of joy and regret. Qiyi, I finally found you. I know you're back too, right? You hate me and I hate myself. Qiyi, I'm sorry. I realized too late. My heart skipped. Had Shen Xing also been reborn? But so what? If you're really sorry, go die and repay my life. I walked past him. Shen Xing reached out to grab me. Unable to dodge, a hand wrapped around my waist. Kia, he pulled me away. A heavy thud sounded behind us. I paused. Kia, he stopped too. Are you going back? I shook my head. If I do, someone won't sleep tonight. Kia, he denied. I won't. Fine, I'll go back. Kia, he grabbed my hand. The stubborn man finally softened. All right, I will.